Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all these wonderful panelists for joining in the conversation. I'm going to do a quick introduction of everybody, and then we're gonna bring up some questions and send it around for some conversation. And then if you have anything that you'd like to ask, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to it during, but definitely we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. Like Joel mentioned, my name is Rosalind Dennett, and I'm coming to you from Algonquin Territory, Smiths Falls, Ontario. And I'm an artist, fiddle player. I spent about 10 years touring back and forth the country and Europe and all over with a band called Oh My Darling, and then spent a lot of time in Toronto as a freelance artist and recorded and performed with some fabulous folks. And then put on my industry cap and have worked for some fabulous organizations like Music Ontario and SEMA, Music Canada Live, anything that has music in Canada and a province in it, I've probably had spent some time with. But right now I work for the Canadian Federation of Musicians, which is the musicians union. And I work as outreach and licensing coordinator there. And I'd like to introduce you to our fabulous panelists here. I'll go around my screen. We have Luther Mallory. Luther is a live music performance coach specializing in stage psychology and has worked with over 700 artists in the last 7 years. There's full bios up on our website, so I'm going to just do a quick one of everybody here and then pass it around a bit. We have Lindsay Sarahzin. Lindsay is a multimedia artist, currently focused on live production and stills photography for movie sets, working in media for over 10 years. Laura Simpson is the CEO and co-founder of Side Door, a Canadian tech startup founded in 2017, whose mission is to create shows anytime, anywhere, first with in-person shows and now online. And we have the fabulous Kimberly. Everyone's fabulous, but I'm actually contractually obligated to say the fabulous Kimberly Sinclair. Kimberly is an award-winning publicist and music industry professional based in Nova Scotia, Canada, and Louisville, Kentucky, it says here. Well, so far away. Since founding Spin Count in 2008, her firm has been awarded Company of the Year 6 times, and Kimberly has been awarded Industry Professional of the Year twice. So the first thing that I want to ask our wonderful panelists is, we're all coming from kind of different places a little bit in the industry, some different roles in the industry, and I'd like to know how this year has been for you, and if you can speak a little bit about yourself and your current situation, where you're at in your career. And I'll send that over first to Lindsay.
Should have saved me for last. I've got the most, I think, to say about that. But the short part of it for me is that I actually haven't stopped working since. And I got to say, I'm really grateful for that opportunity, and my experience in television really played a role into what I'm doing today. A little bit more about me is that I, 10 years ago, graduated from television broadcasting at Canada College here in North Bay, where I'm staying and living right now and working. And a lot of that experience from 10 years ago actually played into the material and content that I'm producing over the last year since COVID happened. I had a little bit of a change up in career goals. About 2 or 3 years ago, I felt like live production was going to be the future. And I had, this was way before I heard about COVID. And I started buying up live equipment about 2 or 3 years ago, about 3 years ago now. And I didn't have a clue how truthful that idea or thought process was until COVID hit, and I was ready to go. So I was just kind of running on an instinct. And so for me, I've been working, fast forward to today, I've worked with the Folk Music Ontario on multiple occasions. I've worked with the Ticarano Music Festival. A lot of these festivals are remote and online and virtual, and I've got in when it was quite early still, and been able to adapt these festivals to a remote audience. And there's still a lot of finessing that I'm doing, but that's been pretty much all I've been working on for the last year. I jumped on a couple of movie sets last year doing stills, but even then I was still working with my crew back at home in their homes while I was on set, trying to make sure that the productions that I was managing were working in a good way. So I've been very blessed to be like incredibly busy and expanding my company, and live productions really taken off. So it's a little bit about my last year in the industry, anyways.
Thank you so much. Go over to Laura.
Hello, I'm coming at you from Halifax too, by the way, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq here. We were doing in-person shows for 2 years and had a big tour set up to go to South by Southwest. So all the artists who were in that project with us, we booked spaces for them to tour down to Austin, and that was our big like launch into the US to try to build out tour routes for people to find alternative spaces to play in. And of course, as soon as South by canceled, that was our pivot, and we have done 700 online shows since then. And we first dialed it in with Zoom because we had been actually using Zoom. Dan Mangan, my co-founder, who's a touring artist, and I have been using it anyway because he's on the West Coast and that's how we communicate. So he was the guinea pig for that. He was the one who helped to figure out how to make that work. And so we really, we secured the ticket first. We tried to figure out how to make it fun and connective. And we worked on that really hard, and then started building out to incorporating venues. So we did a lot of hybrid shows. We did shows that were just using studios or venues. We did a lot of shows with venues, with festivals. We did multiple artists in various places. So I can relate to Lindsay's, like, just, the idea of finessing as you go along and getting better and sort of learning. But our role is the booking and ticketing facilitator, and we support the technology, and we have tons of best practices in terms of the producing of the shows, but we don't actually produce the shows. So that's where we're the sort of window box that helps get it to the audience.
Fantastic. And let's go over to Kimberly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am coming to you from Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, which is, I'm about an hour and a half from Laura, maybe an hour, on the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq. And wearing my publicist hat, a year ago, I think today, or maybe a little bit earlier, I had my bags packed for the Junos with Irish Mythen, my client. So from there, it was more like not just a pivot, but a triple sow cow, because it was a real advanced maneuver for all of my other clients that I'm lucky enough to work with. And I'll just give you an example of what we did with each one. With the Canadian Folk Music Awards, the awards were the beginning of April. So luckily, Graham Lindsay, who is our tech guru, we always put them online, stream them from our website. So we immediately decided we had to cancel everything in person, put that online. So that's one group of people that I assisted putting online. Then with the Philadelphia Folk Festival, where I'm a publicist, which is where the Kentucky tie comes in, Rosalind, because I'm a dual citizen. So I do marketing and publicity for the Philadelphia Folk Festival. And of course, that didn't happen. So that was an interesting pivot, because they created their own online platform, and we can talk about that a little later. We did 168 artists, 4 stages over 3 days. It was crazy town, but it was a blast. And then with my friends at Home Roots out in Winnipeg, again, a year ago, we had half of our artists out on their spring tours. So with them on the road, we immediately had to figure out how to complete the tour and then what would happen with the artist coming up next. So we went into Facebook Live, and boy, was that fun in the early days. Some shows were upside down. Some people didn't have, the right equipment, all the things, but it was a blast and we all learned together. And now what we've done with Home Roots is we do online shows, whether they're ticketed or whether they're by donation. We use various different platforms depending upon how the show goes, and we produce and market and do everything for those shows in-house. And I'm loving every minute of it. So yeah, been very busy this year and having a good time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kimberly. Let's go to Luther.
Yeah, I'm coming in from Toronto. I find that I've been between very busy in the last year and very depressed. Like the artist side of me is just hugely depressed. And I mean, just a roller coaster. And I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that, but like, it's pretty manic depressive, and I pivoted from, because I was working with Iskway for her Juno performance. And then a week later, she was like, oh, we're not going to go do that. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I started to make an album, and just decided to do that. I kind of just dropped everything I was doing. I was like, I'm going to go artist mode and make an album, and been plugging away at that a little bit. But then I changed all of my focus from performance coaching to my mentorship program, for private work online with artists, trying to get through the depression of it all, because that's the main thing I'm finding, because my work is totally about the emotional mental barriers artists are facing, and it always has been that. And so I was like, let me just switch to that. And I've just been talking through the pain and suffering of this thing with artists all year, and then leewaying it as well into a podcast called State of the Artist, which is just about depression and anxiety and all of the emotional craziness that I'm feeling and that every artist that I talk to is feeling. So it's been busy, and it's been a lot of video games also.
Thanks, Luther. Before we go on, Joel's rigged up a little poll for us so that we can just get an idea of the people that are tuning in and see where folks are coming from here. So the question we just want to know is what's your role in the music industry, so we can figure out if we're touching on the things you're interested in, hopefully the things that will relate to where people are at. A lot of these questions are going to be, we're talking about performance, but there's a lot of people that are involved in a performance and getting it to audiences. So we want to know where you're coming from. If you can fill out the poll, that would be great. Cool. And do we get to see the results right away? Or, oh, there we go. Cool. Ooh, lots of other. So mysterious. That's great. Okay, so majority of folks here are artists. And that's the first question that I want to ask to the panel. And this is kind of pivoting off of what Luther was just talking about. It seems like, the drive for artists and performers to create and to share their creativity is inherent. But with this huge disruption, we've certainly seen some artists be able to capitalize on that and flourish and really keep the momentum in their career going. But certainly not everyone, and I'm going to make a leap to say not definitely, but I'm going to make the leap to say not the majority maybe of artists have been able to make that pivot. So my question to the panel is, if you have any, how would you encourage a performer who's maybe struggling with creative fatigue, mental fatigue, Zoom fatigue? At this point, we're kind of in, what we're all hoping is a home stretch, but we don't know, right? So how would you encourage a performer to start engaging with fans, or to keep engaging with fans and audiences, and on the flip side to engage with and for folks that are more on the industry side of things here, how would you encourage them to be engaging with buyers in the industry, and how can they get in the game if they aren't in it already and don't know how? Why don't we start? Let's start with Luther, because you were just starting to touch on some of those themes already.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is, I mean, like even before COVID, I had started pivoting what I talked about with artists from live performance. And this is, I'm a stage performance coach, but even before COVID, I had started talking about the digital world because it was just so clear that we were moving that way. And even if the stage comes back, which hopefully it does, we're still going that way. We're traveling oh so swiftly towards Wall-E, The Matrix, Ready Player One, no doubt. So even if it comes back, we're going over here. So I think the best thing that I could say to artists right now is it's only like 5% of artists still that really take social media seriously. Like most artists are still kind of like, I want what we used to have. I want a tour. I want, like, music industry's classic for clinging to the past, and artists are really bad at accepting change too, me included. And it's like, I want what we used to have. And it's like, but we're going over here. And it's still only like 5% of artists that I see on social media that are trying stuff where you go, oh, you're trying a thing. You got a theme going here. You're trying to build something. You're taking chances. And everybody else is like, here's my face. Here's my face with my chin like this. Here's me looking at the ocean, whatever. And it's like we think that frequency is the entire game on social media. Like consistency of posting is going to do it, but that's simply not the case. And there are artists that are trying and pushing boundaries and risking that are making, building massive followings on these platforms like TikTok. And that's where the reach is. It's simply not anywhere else. Anybody that I talk to that goes, well, I want to book a 7-week tour, I'm kind of like, why though? Why? Because everybody's waiting right here and we're just not taking seriously. So my urge to artists would just be like, look at that space, become an artist / content creator. Kevin James and Will Smith are not the last big celebrities to realize content creator is the better gig. You know what I mean? Because we're all going that way. 2 years from now, it'll be virtual reality social media. That's all it's going to be. We might as well get in there now. That's where all of the space is. So I would say, like, let's just get really serious about that, as serious as we were about learning the violin, the guitar, the vocals, or whatever.
Well, thanks, Luther. Kim, I'm going to go to you there. Do you have advice that you've given to your clients to get them motivated to get back in the game here?
My advice is to work in the here and now, because this is what we're all doing. Zoom is the reality. I don't know about everyone else, but I spend more time on Zoom now than probably in real life. And that's okay, because we're coming up with our own Zoom culture. We're coming up with our own language. It's interesting how it's all evolving. What I do say I echo every sentiment that Luther so brilliantly said, because what we're finding with my artists is content creation is king. You have to find your tribe wherever they are. If your tribe is on TikTok, go and hang out on TikTok. If it's, on Facebook, wherever it is, find your tribe and find your audience and create content and engage with them. The biggest thing I can say is, prior to COVID, when I would say to people, how is your email list? Do you have an email sign up on your website? Are you engaging with your fans? And it wasn't the most exciting topic, let me tell you. But now, where email and social media is the only way that you can reach out to folks and talk to your fans, it's become massive. And with the shows, we have found that artists who are really engaged, performers who are super engaged and are helping us to push the shows, talking to their newsletter, sending in promo videos, doing unique things. If you're making tacos on a Tuesday in your kitchen and hanging out, if you feel comfortable, sometimes if that's your tribe, invite other people in. It's just, you really have to bring out what's the most unique and most interesting about yourself and share that. I know artists and we all in the industry share so much of ourselves, but this is just another way of learning the tools and learning how to share in a way that is relating to your core audience.
Mhm.
Thank you. Laura, so you work, I'm sure, with lots of artists that are self-producing as well as people that are producing, like other producers of concerts. How are you encouraging people to engage with the online platform? And I think you said, yeah, 700 concerts. So it's working, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, two things. I think I'll offer a couple of metrics if it's helpful, because there's an independent study that showed that 5% of people were trying live streams in April, and then 55% were doing it by December. And so there has been a great uptake on people trying it. The other thing is that there's a study that was put out at Nylon, the conference in London just recently, talking about the global trends and how consumers are wanting to engage with their artists that they love. And there was this huge spike in ticketing live shows, which of course is of interest to me because most of our shows are ticketed. And so while I understand the content game and the social media game, I kind of tried to build an opposite path for artists with Side Door, in that it's sort of, you are looking for people to come and pay for your art, a hard ticket as they come in. We also do free shows and you can pay by donation, and people do that and that's fine. We also have pay what you can now, so you can have a minimum price and then you can add. And in my experience, like, we've seen the ticket price go from an average of $5 to $11 over this time period. So people are actually able to put the price up and get for it, as well as the numbers of people attending shows has been going up. We're remarketing to all of the 50,000 audience members that we've brought on the platform. So we're trying to develop a way that is an alternative to, like, I listen to this and I can feel the cringe of so many artists that I know are not into posting content. And so while you can do that, and that's good, and you should do that, there's also the artists who just can't muster that up, and performance is the only thing they know. And so I just want to give voice to, like, that is also a possibility. It does work. You can find ways to do that, whether it's with us or with another platform.
Thanks, Laura. Lindsay, I guess you also work with, festival producers and, on the more that production side, but as well as being creative yourself. So how have you found the motivation, and what advice would you give to people who are looking for that creative spark right now?
Just do it. You know what? Actually, I was thinking about this question while everybody was speaking, and I one of the teachings that we have, that I was told about a long time ago about winter, was that that during the time, like long time ago, Indigenous people used to create more in the winter time when everybody's in their homes. They don't leave the lodges because it's -40 out and you don't want to go out in the cold unless you have to. And so your families in these huge homes have nothing else to do except stay inside. And what do? Well, you create. And that was something that I remembered last year. I lost a lot of my work, as much as everybody else did. And one of the things that I had a panic moment, and I remember at that time that I was like, you know what? This is a good time for me to sit back and create and develop something different and learn about myself in a different way. And so when I started my transition into to live production fully, it only took me about 2 or 3 weeks. I work pretty quick because I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm used to things moving all the time, I guess, in terms of like I've never had a stable job in probably about 10 years. So, and any filmmakers in the lobby can pretty much echo my same thoughts there, is that we never had a stable job, and any of the artists as well. So when you lose your work, what do? You got to sit back and really think about creation and what you can do. And a lot of these, I've spoken to a lot of Indigenous artists who have come out with new albums over the last year. They've finally had the time to create, to sit down, write, use some of that energy, and just redirect that energy. And and like Luther was saying, that I'm sure there's lots of people that are running through that depression. Use that, use that fuel, use that fire. And it may be hard in that time, but once you start getting going and you get the creative process going, we're artists, right? We always, once you put the pencil to the paper, you can't stop. And so for me, I remember that teaching of how we used to sit, and so I've used that to actually go forward and create more. And how do I transition all that stuff that was just literally sitting there? Okay, I got to make money. I got rent coming up. I don't have no fallbacks. I got to figure it out. And so, and then the rest was history for me. It was just working on live productions and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to mention that was, yeah, I am a creative. I am an artist too, even though I do a lot of tech stuff. But that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned through entrepreneurship and just growing as an artist, is that take a little break, lick your wounds, get back at her, and just get it happening, get it done.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's like necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it. Like, we're all changing to the platforms, like everybody was saying, like that. That's really interesting to hear about that. 5% of people were streaming, and then now it's at 55%. Like, that for me is really interesting, because I was doing this thing called I was working on, and Luther and I were talking about a little bit earlier, was Twitch. And that's where I was cutting my teeth with live production and live streaming before I actually took it to an actual audience. So I didn't have a lot of viewers, but for me, that was where I got my practice in, and that's where I made my mistakes. And now everybody's catching up to that point. Like, adapting to the times is so important for artists. And so just jumping on a live stream, even if you don't know how to do it, so important, because, like, yeah, you'll screw up in front of an audience. Everybody gets it. You're all stuck inside. We're all gonna just stick it out with you. So yeah, that adapting is so important to today.
Thanks. Yeah, and that really sets us up for my next question, because I feel like at this point, we're pretty much a year in. Laura gave that great statistic that the amount of people doing these live streams has grown so much. Last week I was watching, I was virtually in Kansas City and the Yukon and New York City, and there's a lot happening now in the virtual world, and there's a lot that, as an audience member and an industry member, that you can participate in. So now that people are feeling a lot more comfortable in the virtual world, and there's a lot more content out there, I'd love to get people's perspective on how you can stand out, how you can create something unique. What are some, maybe we'll start with, I'll go around the circle again. Luther, I'd love to know from you specifically what, for the physical performance of it, what are some things that people can do to stand out and to make a memorable performance when it's behind the screen?
Sure. Yeah. This is neat too, because somebody messaged, an anonymous attendee said, how would you recommend an artist make the same magic performance connection with an audience in an online performance as we had live show? And so I don't know if you can do it the same, but that's where we're at, right? And online is really, really unique and interesting, because the amount of new stuff we can do and we'll be able to do with that. Like, a couple of years from now, we'll be able to do, you can have dinosaurs eat your face at your live show. You know what I mean? You'll be able to do anything. That's insane, right? So like the opportunities are crazy, but what it all comes down to, when you get baseline artist with a guitar and a voice or something like that, or whatever, it really just comes down to risk. In my work, like all I'm ever shoving artists into is go like, take more risks, do something crazy, backflip off the stage, see what happens. Like you can do anything. And the more risk you take, the crazier it is, the more harshly you will be judged for it. And that's good, because that puts you in that camp of people going like, I hate that, or I love that. But artists are so used to risking this much. Same within life, right? In our relationships, in everything, we go, here's the control zone. Anything outside of that feels like too much of a risk for me, and it's very uncomfortable. But the good shit is here and here, right? So that's what I'm saying is like, even before we get into how do we make magic in the online and stuff, like risk more in life, practice it in life, bring it into your art and go, what could I do that would really make someone go, I can't do that. That's crazy, or that's weird, or that's intense, or something like that, because we all have that power. We just have to design that thing, get the guts together and do something. So baseline, before you even get into green screens and whatever else we want to do online, is like, what do you got inside you that would just make someone go, okay, that's worth looking at? And that's all about risk.
That's a great perspective. Yeah, I find personally as a performer, some of the most memorable performances and the times where I get the most engagement with an audience is when I screw up, when I mess something up on stage and people remember it. It's something different. Some of the most boring, I've seen some of my favorite artists perform, and they've been some of the most boring performances I've ever seen because they were perfect.
Yeah,
I wish there was a scratch or a
that's right. Well, the human stuff, right? Like nobody likes a perfect person. You're like, can you at least tell me you've killed someone or something, so you can just like be interesting to me? Because like I would issue the challenge to the audience, to everybody watching too. It's like, if you think of your favorite moment ever from a live performance, I guarantee it's going to be on the emotional side, not the technical side. It's going to be the time that somebody risked something, because as humans, we go, that guy. Yeah, that. We don't go like, oh, you nailed the Swiss Army triplets on the drums. Who cares about that? No, like I like when the guy, whatever, brought a bat on stage and knocked some merch into the audience, something that required the person to get some guts together.
It's great. Kimberly, I'm gonna ask you the same question, and especially because you were in the promotional world, so maybe we can get your perspective in terms of promoting your live performance or your online live performance, how people can stand out now.
Well, I think there's so many unique ways. Again, the word is unique. With online these days, your background is everything. If you all don't know about Room Rater on Twitter, you might want to check it out. They give great tips, because what you're doing is you're creating a world for people to come into when you're online. So that world should reflect you and everything that you're about. So you're inviting people into your home, which, let's say some really good things about going online. Everyone with an online show has a front row seat. They get to see everything, warts and all, so to speak, which we've gotten a lot of amazing feedback about that. People appreciate it. There are also people who were shut-ins and didn't have the ability ever to leave the house, and now they are getting all the entertainment they could ever want and loving that as well. So, you know, if we flip to the audience point of view, what is it they want to see? Well, they want to see everything. They're curious. They're curious about your background, your home. They want to know about your animals. In some of our shows, we put specific cameras on the animals because the audience knows the performers so well because of Instagram or whatever they're following. They know that they have a dog, they got a puppy, they have a cat, they have whatever it is. So we'll put the camera there. And in one particular show, the dog slept the entire time, which made it even more hilarious because all of this is going on around it. So when when we're talking about making the show unique, we're not saying, it's not anything difficult. It's just being more of yourself. And there is one more thing that I'd really like to point out for anyone who hasn't tried to go online yet. An online show takes the same amount of effort, production, and team behind it as a stage show does. Don't forget that, because if you're putting on a show, you're putting on a show. So the fact that there's no one actually sitting in front of you, it doesn't really matter because they are there. So I encourage everyone to jump in the deep end of the pool. We all did, and we're having a good time.
You bring up, the good point about, it's still a show. There's still as much that goes into creating it. But in a lot of cases, it's just the person themselves, right? There isn't that team now. So maybe Laura, could you speak a little bit about how people can, what they can do to be that team for themselves, I guess, and how you've been finding that the concerts that you guys have been promoting, what's been successes for you?
Yeah, I echo Kimberly's thoughts about, making it a world, and especially, we've seen some amazing backgrounds and set decks and that sort of thing. And, one thing that we realize is that the tech is really overwhelming to do at the same time as the show. So we actually host everything on our accounts now, either like a broadcast or interactive shows. We launch the show for them. We do a check-in with them. We check that the sound and the video is good. We manage all the support requests for the audience wondering how to Chromecast to their TV, because if you're the performer, you can't focus on that. And if you have somebody else on your team who can manage that, or like what Home Roots is doing is amazing to help produce it, or just having somebody else focus on that, that's great. If you don't, then you can just say up front, like, I am one person producing this show, and therefore I'm not going to be able to attend to the chat until the break, or I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to do a check with you. You have to feedback to me if it sounds good. So you're actually using the audience as a sound check and that sort of thing. And know that there's a lot of, the audience is really there for that. They're really in it to win it with you. If they've come to a show, they want you to be successful. We've seen so many cases where the audience is half of the show still, even online. Like, they really are an active part of the show, and how it brings energy, and the kind of content and the feedback and the requests and all that sort of thing. We do a lot with like spotlighting audience members and asking them, what their requests are, tell stories and that sort of thing. I have my own favorite audience members now from every show. So I would just, if you're doing it solo, for sure, I would say just really just give some expectations at the outset so that you can set yourself up for success and not have to achieve more than you really can do.
That's great advice. Lindsay, you spoke a bit about your journey finding, going to Twitch first and then discovering other platforms. On the topic of promotion right now, where how would you recommend that people find their place? Like, how did you, if you were on one platform and then thought, what, I think actually this other platform is better, how do you make those decisions?
At the start, I think finding your finding the platform that works well with you. It's really about building your own community. So a lot of if you kind of break down live streamers and like video gamers, musicians, you go to a place like Twitch, um, they all have individual communities that they've built. And so if you're solo performing, maybe you don't have a certain online venue that you're going to. You're doing all the tech and everything on your own. Finding your community is and building your community starts with one, and it grows to two, and it grows to three, and then and sometimes if you do have fans, like let's say you have Facebook, jump on Facebook Live and start performing there. Your fans will follow you, and that'll be your community, your online community. So like promoting and building your community is really the key. Like from for solo performing is just like, yeah, starting in one platform, moving on to the next sometimes works. Sometimes you can bring your community to I think has a lot easier in terms of monetization, but it's a lot harder in terms of building that community because it's such a big world. And also you kind of jump to the bottom of the playlists every time you're in Twitch. So that's why it's so important to build that community. And you already have one. If you're a performer, you already have a community, and it's just about bringing those folks online with you. I worked with a young guy here in town, and he was I yeah, he came in and he didn't know how to do the live stream thing, and we went live to his Facebook page, and I think he had over 500 viewers within the week within that time. And he was telling me, he's like, I've never had that many viewers before. But it's like really just, you know, hey, we promoted that we were going live, and you made some social media hits. Hey, we're at the office, we're at the studio doing this. Hey, and now you're live. And actually, which kind of comes to the point that I wanted to make, was that he was really engaging with his audience. Now, I know that we were talking a little bit about doing different things or being unique and bringing that human element into your online presence. And a lot of that human element is just being real. We're working in a 2D space. On a 3D, in 3 in a real stage or a real space, um, your interactions right in front of you with your crowd could be one person, it could be 1,000 people, 10,000 people, right? You're with that person. When you're in a 2D space, it's just one-on-one. You might have 50 viewers watching, but you're actually talking to that individual behind that screen. I'm not sure if explaining it properly, but in a one-on-one space. So when somebody mentions in a chat box, hey, I love your new background, you know, you're talking to that individual times like 10 or whatever. But it's so important that I've actually one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for people that are live streaming and deciding, and like technical producers, or sorry, and other creative producers, when they want a live versus like a pre-recorded material, the biggest advice I have is try to decide how you want to engage with your audience. Live performance in Zoom or Facebook Live or Twitch, YouTube Live, all those spaces are it's so important to engage from a personal perspective, because like I said, that how do you want to that 2D space is so important that you're talking right to that viewer. I'm talking to you. And so yeah, that's one of the things, is like, how do you want to engage? And if you are going to do live and you want to be unique, you need to acknowledge your audience. You need to acknowledge them individually, and the shout outs work, and and yeah, making those mistakes like you guys were saying, that's all part of that human element, but you're just bringing it to this 2D space. So yeah, sorry, thanks Luther. I saw their comment there. Yeah.
So I'm gonna put one more quick question to the panel, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience here. But I want just a quick perspective about where you think we're heading when we go back to when we do have the ability to do live in-person performances. Where do you what are some maybe lessons that we can bring with us from this year into that? And where are you optimistic? Where do you see this going? Let's mix it up a bit. Let's start with Laura.
Yeah, we're already planning our re-entry, as it were. So I really look at the online shows as a bridge that will keep on going in a lot of aspects. It helps to sort of preview folks for the shows that we set up in person. We do active recruiting from our audiences to get people to open up their spaces for in-person shows. So we do a lot of that now in preparation for the reopening and re-engaging with the spaces we already had. But, somebody mentioned earlier, and this is so true, is that the people who are going to the online shows aren't necessarily the same people who are going to in-person shows. And I've really seen that a lot. And I'm starting to test that with some of the data that we have, because, you know, for the most part, you're starting to see people in rural locations, people with kids who can't get out as much. You're seeing people with sensory, they have sensory sensitivities, and so they don't go out to big spaces. They don't want to be in a space where there's alcohol. Like, there's so many reasons why people don't go to live shows, and online shows have been a gift for that. And I really think that's going to continue. And so we're really looking at how to make the hybrid show be excellent. It's, online shows are one thing, in-person shows are another thing. The hybrid show is actually a completely different beast, because now you're performing to two audiences. And so we're really trying to figure out that, so that people can, when they go back and they're doing it maybe regionally and at first, and they want to maximize the amount of money they can earn in one performance, how to add an online performance and make it great so that both audiences feel like they're served. And I think if we can kind of nail that, like as an industry, like really set expectations for, that to be a regular thing, I think you're going to see much higher ROI for the artists on these shows. Like, I'd love to see artists be able to go to do a 5-date tour and then come home and feel like they have money in their pocket. Like, that's ideal. Let's not go back to let's not go back to touring your face off and getting sick and leaving your family. Like, there's a better way. And I hope online shows is part of that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Luther.
Yeah, well said, Laura. You got some interesting input there. Yeah, because I toured my face off all through my 20s, and I, made or spent $7,000 every tour and made $7,025 back. And it was insane. Yeah. And so I'm pretty excited for the future of that. That idea of the hybrid show is interesting. And it's also interesting because where we're at in this world right now, it is like, like all of us are guessing somewhat, obviously, like, because it's just so weird. And with some data, obviously, but it does seem like the answer to that is I think artists just need to go and experiment and stop being afraid of the online space. Like, do the required 3 hours of it through TikTok and see what's happening there and go like, oh, okay, I'm seeing how this works. Right. There's a trend that actually I could authentically fit into. That's kind of interesting. Here's how people are presenting covers now. Nobody does full songs even anymore. And everybody's on drum pads and they build the looping thing. And that's interesting. And most of the artists I talk to don't even know that much because they've been afraid of the space. So they go like, well, how do you do it? I'm even getting questions here privately, like, kind of, how do you do it? And it's like, well, you just have to kind of discover it and figure out what's happening, because the culture is shifting and everybody is shifting the culture. The artist problem is we're not paying attention to the shift and we're resisting it, as the music industry always has, because we want what we used to have when there was private jets and cocaine everywhere or whatever. And we went, hey, we want that back. And it's like, it's gone. It's gone. So I really, I mean, I'm at the risk of being redundant. I'm saying that, yeah, artists like have to stop being afraid of that space, because live is the antiquated model now. I hope it comes back. I've been on stage 1,000 times. I'm a live performer. That's what I want. But I'm seeing the future. I love this hybrid idea that Laura is pitching.
Fantastic.
I'm not
Kimberly.
sure what I. Sorry.
Oh, so I said that's fantastic. I'm just going to move over to Kimberly.
Please, yeah.
Yes, there's not an organization that I work with that we're not keeping digital on the table going forward. That includes the Philadelphia Folk Festival. I mean, they built that digital platform, so they are going to have a digital online element every year going forward. At Home Roots, the same thing. We've found, to Laura's point, and that was well said, that the audience is not necessarily our traditional audience. We've discovered a whole new group of people out there who've jumped in with us online. I mean, it's so amazing to see the audience people that come. I mean, some people are literally laying in bed with their phone like this, watching a show. And it's just really cool to get all these glimpses into people's lives. And this weekend, we're having the Winnipeg Cranky Festival, and it's entirely online. And a lot of things are going to donation only, but don't be afraid of a donation style show, because what you can do is you can go live on Facebook, then you can upload your video to YouTube, where forever and ever, potentially people will send you money. And I know this is a thing because we started on Facebook Live, and we always do follow up with our artists and polls. And we have found that the money continues to come in. So don't be afraid of that as well. It's not terrifying online. It just takes practice. Change is scary, but we all feel that this, and by we, I mean the people that I work with, open opportunities. I know it's closed, obviously, a lot of doors, but in a way, it's opened a lot of doors as well, and given us all a new perspective on the industry and how we'll all move forward together. So I encourage everybody to hit that live button and get yourself a light ring and a little microphone and go to town.
Lindsay.
I don't have much to add here because I know we're a little bit short on time, but
Yeah.
basically, in my world, I'm getting a lot of requests for hybrid projects, and just to quote on those projects and to anticipate potentially whether or not we will be live in person or such. I think until the vaccines rolled out, until things have slowed down in COVID land, it's going to be, I don't want to be a doomsday sayer here, but it might be a couple of years till we see a full live show again. And that's just me being realistic about it. And so hybrids will be limited audience, and your bigger audience will still be on the internet. You might still have 2,000 people watching, but you might only have 50 people in person, at least in the near future. And then maybe a little bit further down the road, like I said, the big shows will come back. It's just a matter of time and getting back to the world, back to a good place in its health.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get a question from our audience. I didn't leave a ton of time because sorry. But hopefully we were able to answer a lot of folks' questions while we went along here. Joel, are you?
I'm here. Yes, indeed. Looks like there's a question from Michelle here in the chat. Can we consider how virtual and online programming has expanded the accessibility of these shows to a large segment of our audiences, while also highlighting the tech barriers that may exist for some of those audiences? Now, I know you did mention that to new audiences, Laura, but perhaps audiences that would have never found them otherwise?
Yeah, I can mention we've been doing, actually Gianna, who's in attendance, was working more closely with these shows, but I know that we did a show that was for the visually impaired, and so it was mostly audio driven, and then we were looking on the other side at more closed captioning options. And And there's just all these things that come up, and then you sort of see the opportunity to serve these underserved audiences who really want to engage. And so there's so much opportunity with tech that makes this accessible. This makes this format accessible to people who it wasn't to before.
Yeah, and to answer my perspective on Michelle's question, I think that a good example of this year's Folk Alliance was one of the biggest years. They had more attendees than ever. And when we're seeing the accessibility open up to a lot of people, hopefully when as Michelle mentioned, it also becomes inaccessible to people who aren't able to use the technology to access an online event. So I love that we've talked so much about these hybrid events now, and I really agree with everyone in saying that seems like the way forward for the next little bit, because hopefully that really addresses the accessibility issues on hopefully both sides of the coin there. Joel, do we have time for another question, or are we?
Well, I can mention to people that in the Q&A, Luther's done some fantastic side work answering questions in there throughout the presentation. Fantastic work there, Luther. Also, if you'd like to speak your question, you can raise your hand virtually and I will unmute you. But perhaps you guys had such a fantastic convo that you answered everyone's questions.
There was just one from Jocelyn that I wanted to just really touch base on. It was the ideal length of an online show. If you do go through research, I really, really, really strongly encourage everybody to look at Twitch. It may not be your scene as soon as you jump into it, but look at what those content creators are doing. Look at what there's actually a whole music section. There's art section, there's music section. Jump onto Twitch and see what they're doing. Now, a lot of their shows are anywhere between, I've seen 2 to 4 hours in length, and that's musicians. And so there's a lot of banter in between. The shorter shows, I find that they're more traditional sets in the sense where the artist just plays. One of my favorite artists just plays a piano. She plays musics. Yeah, so she just plays piano and she sings. And when I'm working, I love listening to that. And she goes for about an hour, 2 hours, and has brief intermissions and stuff. And so but on TikTok, you might have 30 seconds or whatever that time frame on TikTok is. Facebook, you might jump on for an hour. It depends on how engaging you are with your audience, how much engagement you are leaving out on the table for your audience. So if you're just kind of playing, then a lot of people just join in and listen. But if you're actually talking and interacting with them, that 2-hour performance might turn into a 4-hour performance, because now you're bringing your everyday experiences into that performance in a different way. So just wanted to say, it could range anywhere from 30 seconds to 4 hours, just for a solo every night, live set. But yeah, check out Twitch. Twitch is owned by Amazon. Thanks, Kimberly. And and definitely check out what other people are doing and base your models off of that.
So I think
we're good to wrap up. Yeah.
This is the cue. Okay. Well, I'd like to personally thank you all for all the audience for joining us, and then people later on watching. Thank you so much to our fantastic panelists. I really enjoyed this conversation and some fantastic insights here. Luther, Mallory, Kimberly Sinclair, Laura Simpson, Lindsay Sarahzin. Everybody, I'm sure, has their things that you can follow on various social media. Check out their websites. Everybody's name's up on the Folk Music Ontario website. And I'd like to thank Alka and Joel at Folk Music Ontario for putting this together.